The NBA trade deadline is in the books, so let's take a minute, reset, and talk about who the title favorite actually is, and it may not be who you think. Welcome to Chuck and Darts, a podcast of informed, rigorous, reckless, harmless, speculative, and fun predictions about the game we love. You can call me Chuck. This is episode, I guess, like 239, around there. I have not recorded in a little while. So welcome back, everybody. Glad to have you. My last episode was in December of 2025. It's now February of 2026. The Super Bowl just happened. Congrats to the Seahawks. But my last episode was with Brian Geisinger, Split the Action Substack. He covers the ACC very, very well. And that was about the ACC sort of tilt of this draft class. We talked about in that episode Cam Boozer, Caleb Wilson, Mikel Brown Jr. at Louisville, Pat Gungba, Henry Vasar, and Neoclis of Dallas. And there's more ACC guys to talk about. I might have Brian on, between now and the draft again to loop back in on that. Uh, but that was my first episode about the 2026 draft. And I've been active on Twitter and Blue Sky with clips and thoughts since then, but not actually gotten a chance to really dig into anything. And this is going to be a split episode where we talk a little bit about the NBA and the trade deadline and the title picture, never too early. And we're going to talk a little bit about the number one pick in this year's draft, which I think is proving to be a very fascinating race. To help me do it is a dear friend who appeared on this podcast back, I believe, in 2023. I think around this time of year in 2023, to talk about the title picture and about the 2023 NBA draft. And his triannual appearance is up. His fee is paid, and he's back. He is at BenDog28 on Twitter. Bennett Herbert, group chat aficionado, staple, and just a very good friend who I've gotten to know a little bit at Summer League when I've gone the last couple of years. So, Bennett, welcome back, man. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Chuck.
So, Bennett, you are a San Antonio Spurs fan.
I am.
And we were trying to find time to do an episode really since the beginning of the season. And there was we could have talked about the Spurs at any time from it just being a healthy Wemby season. I think it's sort of easy to forget that he was hurt. And the cup and the games against the Thunder and their sort of national statement. Then, the Dylan Harper sort of step back and how is this guard rotation going to work? And then there's the Giannis rumors and what are they all going to do? And now here we are. And the Spurs are 37-16. They are, I believe, 3.5 games out of the number one seed in the West, looking up at only one team, the Thunder. And they've gotten plenty of national attention, rightfully so. Many good podcasts have covered them in detail. Uh, but I haven't heard you cover them anywhere, and your insights are the ones I'm frankly very interested in. So I'll bury my own lead about where I'm at on the Spurs. What are you seeing out of the Spurs right now? I imagine this is basically 21 games over 500. This is sort of better than where you thought they'd be. And how do you think they shape up for this year's playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're well ahead of where both of us believed. As a fan, I want the best and I have the optimistic view on lots of things. But I think preseason there was a lot of talk from national media about being very bullish on the Spurs depth and that the Spurs depth was gonna have them exceed expectations. And I was honestly like, all right, we'll see. Like it's okay. I don't know. They were right. Our depth has been really incredible. I think almost every single rotation player has exceeded expectations, from the starters to the bench. I mean, I really think Keldon Johnson's a very worthy six man of the year candidate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I thought I came into the season thinking like, let's make playoffs. Let's make playoffs. And as the season's gone on, it's just more become now, let's win in the playoffs. And that's really crazy. I think they're probably the third best team in the league right now. And
OKC and Detroit
I,
being 1 and 2.
I think Denver. I'm thinking kind of
Oh,
future
you're thinking
healthy.
about
Yeah, maybe like
okay.
right now. Yeah, okay, right now third behind OKC and Detroit. In like 2 months, third behind OKC and Denver, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how I'm viewing it. And yeah, I think that you can kind of go down the roster and talk about how each guy has like really contributed to this and just exceeded expectations. And I think Mitch Johnson gets a lot of credit for that. So in terms of why they're exceeding expectations, there's a lot of reasons for each player. But just they're really connected, especially on defense, in a way that we have not seen in the past few years of the Spurs. Like they're just a step ahead on defense. When in years past you would just lose games you should win because just open shots left and right. So I think bringing in Sean Sweeney from Dallas as the
Hmm.
defensive coordinator has really helped with that. But yeah, they're just connected like a good team. They're not just like talented and young. Like they're playing sharp from the jump this year, which is really something.
And I'm glad you mentioned Sean Sweeney because he was, I believe, the lead defensive assistant on Dallas when they, as sort of a young, ahead of schedule team, made the Western Conference Finals in 2022, which I believe was Luka's like fifth year, maybe
Yeah,
uh,
fourth, fifth, yeah, yeah. Mhm.
fourth year, and then obviously they make the finals 2 years after that. And that team, what don't want to go down a Luka trade tangent. But that team, it may have been memory hold for some people, but both of those teams were actually very good defensive teams for whatever questions there were about, Luka and his personal individual defense. The
And
the
good
I
beyond their personnel too, right? Like they were really, really good on defense when like it didn't seem like a monstrous defensive personnel. They just
right.
kicked butt every game.
Like Reggie Bullock playing 40 plus minutes, and Finney Smith was probably their best individual defender. Yeah, I agree. And then 2024 was sort of like a more talented, longer, bigger
Hmm.
version of a lot of the same concepts. So when you say that the Spurs are playing very sharp, what they have this defensive weapon that is so unprecedented, really, at least for decades, it seems unprecedented. But how do they both use Wemby like to weaponize him and also insulate him to make his life a little bit easier? And the reason I ask is because I think that the Spurs defense is like a very underrated unit. Like you'll hear as you get closer to the playoffs, well, who has the best unit on which side of the ball? Is it the Thunder defense sort of had that designation last year?
Yeah.
I think the Spurs defense has the potential by the time we get to where the chips are down to be very high in that conversation. So what about the Spurs defense is so special apart from obviously the personnel when beyond down?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so it's a few things, and you hit on it really well. So for one, the Wemby piece itself, he is better on defense than he was in years past, and that sounds like simple or basic, or maybe he was like the best defender last year, but yeah, but he's better this year because he has better instincts off the ball. Like he is knowing when to communicate like a switch when his guy is trying to run up to get him to the perimeter, and he was not communicating that as often in years past, and he's staying low on that. And so you can see that off ball when his guy runs up, he will yell to the perimeter, "Hey, take my guy! I'm staying low." It's just kind of crazy. He was so impactful at defense in years past, while being literally like out of position sometimes and being late or being off on when to help and not, and he was still that impactful. Now you're getting the same length, same athleticism, but with actually sharper instincts. So the anchor itself is obvious, but the anchor itself has actually also gotten better from a year ago. So that's the first thing. I think the guards are playing more aggressive strategically when he's on the court. Like they will cheat and kind of gamble and just really pressure because they know when if they get beat, he's there to help them out. And now they're getting reps where they get beat, quote unquote, badly into his funnel, and their pattern recognition of, okay, I've gotten beat. I know Wemby is going to force kick out here. Like I'm not really worried about
Mm-hmm.
I got beat. There's a contested shot. Should I box out? No, kick out is coming. So they're already when they get beat, looking for where to scram on the kick out. They're switching off that. Well, like I said, it's just like a one step quicker. It's one step more aware than it was in years past. And then you can see the guards play more conservative defense and less gambling less when Wemby is off the court. So that's something kind of cool to see how they kind of adjust with when they have the generational funnel there versus when they don't. But honestly, the biggest thing is Cornet. The biggest thing with the Spurs defense is that the non-Wemby minutes the past 2 years have just completely tanked the elite
Hmm.
Wemby minutes, and Cornet has completely changed that. He like when neither is on, we get absolutely smashed. But having him there when Wemby is off has taken our non-Wemby defense from like bottom of the league to respectable. And so it's kind of like you're surviving so much better when Wemby's off, and things are sharper when he's on. And you have the option of French vanilla, which has been really strong defense. That's when Wemby and Cornet play together. Uh,
No, I got it. Thank
so
you.
all those things combined, it has really caused a jump that I like hoped for, but really did not expect. Yeah.
Tremendous. And as far as the integration of the players who have joined even since Wembanyama, speaking mainly of Castle and then this year Dylan Harper and most recently Carter Bryant, uh, how do you think the coaching staff has done getting them up to speed? And do you see anything, I guess, recently, maybe since the beginning of the year or something, where it seems like something is clicking at maybe a higher level? Are they rounding into shape? Because I'm phrasing it that way because I think they are, but I want to hear from you.
Yeah. Yeah, Castle's a little interesting because he's a bit of a he started out on fire to start the year, made a jump to start the year that I did not expect, and really
Hmm.
kind of changed my thought of I was already too low on him pre-draft, and then for him to jump this much second year was like I was like, gosh, he's really valuable. But then he kind of dipped a little bit and had some bad stretches in a row there for a little bit. Slumped, just a lot of different things that were going his way were not. And then he's really come on back these last few weeks and really taken off. So he's kind of an up and down guy. Carter Bryant is the one who last few weeks is really like, okay, he's just a completely different player than he was to start the year, getting some play time. I think um, kind of actually um, compelling the front office today to waive Jeremy Sohan because they
That's right. That
want
happened
Carter
today.
Bryant
Shout out to
doing
Jeremy. He'll catch
miserably.
on. He'll be
Yeah, I
heard
know. Yeah,
from,
he's
but yeah.
talented. It's not the fit, which is a shame because he's a great guy. I think the Spurs loved him, but he's gonna succeed elsewhere. He's really talented. But I think Keldon and Carter Bryant kind of in the aggregate just took all the benefits of Jeremy on this team. But
Well, to say
um,
nothing of Champagny and Barnes, just being veterans who
yeah,
knock down threes, which is what they need them to
and
do. But
Champagne's rebounding is like really low key
yeah,
valuable. People don't know it, but like he's able to survive with small lineups because Champagne's such a good rebounder for his size. Yeah.
he and
Um,
his twin brother both. Yep.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Um, But no, Castle's probably the most interesting. I mean, um, the turnovers are like the big kind of bugaboo. That's the one thing that like really gets frustrating. But I will say they were worse before Fox. Fox missed the first 9 games or so with a hamstring. When Fox came back, the Castle turnovers plummeted, and actually the assists went up. So it was really like, okay, he just had this role that he so much on his plate he did not have to have, and having Fox kind of take that from him kind of helped him fit in well. So yeah, the three guards are going great. Like any given night, it feels like two of the three are on, and that's pretty much what you can ask for. So
Yeah, I know that the lineup data is still developing, but uh generally, Wemby plus Castle's great. Wemby plus Fox is great. When Fox and Castle play together, it has not really stuck yet as a solidly positive, +5 or more points per 100 kind of lineup. What do you see about the chemistry or lack thereof that Castle and Fox are exhibiting, and like where do you think it's going to go? Again, as far as this season goes.
yeah. I mean, they're really still figuring it out, and you can like see that. Like you can just see hesitations and passes between the two that like it like they have only played so many games together.
Hmm.
Um, I think that one nice thing about it is when they play together, whichever side gets the rebound or the ball quickly, the other side can push and go up the court. And so that's
Yep.
nice. I think a lot of it comes down to Castle's big kind of swing skill or has question mark, which is his 3-point shooting. I do think that he often provides the help point for the defense to help from because he does not shoot the three ball very well. So I think that's kind of the obvious thing that you want him to get better at just for spacing sake. Um, but I don't have long-term concerns about Fox and Castle like together. I don't think that they are a bad fit as a backcourt by any means.
Okay. Well, I'll say that the given narrative for a team like San Antonio, especially with a young guard like Castle, who had these turnover issues earlier in the year and
Yeah.
whose three-point jumper remains his sort of persistent, I guess, top of the scouting report bullet
Oh yeah.
point. That's when they get to the playoffs, it's going to be, help off him, help off him, help off him, try to shrink the floor as much as possible and try to slow the Spurs down. I agree with you that it is really uh good that not only can they push, but Fox and Castle are both wired to push. Fox has always been a speed demon. Castle's no slouch in that area, but his antenna are always up and he always looks to push when he can. But the narrative about a team like that is going to be like, oh, well, that's all well and good. Everything's going to slow down in the playoffs.
Yeah.
This is going to be their first exposure to a 7 game series. And, you know, the media will do what is very predictable, but what always gets under my skin. And I'm not even a Spurs fan, but what gets under my skin is just like the very patronizing, oh, what a nice experience for this team. Isn't it so good that they get to have a taste of the limelight? And oh, what a valuable lesson this 6 game loss will be in round one to whomever. I don't know. The
Yeah.
interesting thing is that there's not sort of, apart from, I guess you would say, the Nuggets, there's not really sort of an old dog Western Conference team the way that the Warriors were for the Rockets last year that I think most people would like by default take against the Spurs. It's another conversation for another day. But do you sort of share like part of the reason it bothers me is that there is truth to it a lot of the time. Warriors beat the Rockets in 7. A lot of people were expecting some result like that. But do you buy that like the Spurs are not going to be able to have a 2022 Mavs kind of run where they arrive ahead of schedule in the conference finals or beyond?
Yeah, it's a good
Given that
question.
they may end
Yeah.
up in the 2 seed, just as a reminder. But go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't buy it. I think that they're a little too good to pigeonhole like that. Yeah, I think, and I think it's also one of those things like it's Wembanyama is generational at this point. He is transformative. He's an outlier amongst the outliers in a way that like, oh, most young teams' first playoff appearance do not make the conference finals. Like, yeah, most young teams who make the playoffs don't have Wembanyama. It's not ridiculous to talk about him in those terms. I think he's been the fifth or sixth best player in the league this year, and he's getting better. Like, you know what I mean? So. I don't think of it in those terms. I think it's interesting to talk about the game, the playoff series slowing down, and half court versus, full court. Or, oh, hey, it's a team that's really like succeeding with their depth. Well, rotations kind of shrink in the playoffs, and so are you like gonna beat the top end talent when your bench isn't just bashing other teams' benches? That is worthy of thought, but I do think the team is good enough to where like they should win one playoff series, they can win two. And you make an interesting point about the only old dog really being Denver. That feels kind of unique this year, yeah.
Well, so yeah, the current standings are the Spurs in the 2 seed. Now, obviously, you have to have the play-in to determine who the 7 seed actually is, but the current team in that spot is the Suns. The Suns obviously are not going to qualify as someone who gets any sort of points for,
Right.
grandfathering in playoff experience. The 6 seed is the Lakers, and that would sort of be your old dog in theory, but this version of the Lakers just got kind of waxed by the Wolves last year, and they are, with all due respect to how good their offense can be, like they're a team with very notable flaws as well, that same as that the Spurs have, and the Spurs have, I think, defensive personnel to really frustrate their offense, and I would favor the Spurs in a series like that. I'd like to see it, but I would favor the Spurs in a series like that. The 5 seed is the Wolves, who have been to the conference finals a couple times, but again, they kind of suffer from a sort of identity crisis some of the time about what their offense is going to look like down the stretch in games, even though it can look very good. The Rockets are fourth, and I think the way they're playing right now, it would be sort of a pleasant surprise if they held on to that fourth seed. And then you've got Nuggets three, Spurs two, Thunder one. Uh, so that second round series, again, if everything ended today, they could be playing the Nuggets, and then they would sort of be in the spot the Thunder were last year. I, without getting ahead of ourselves in terms of what that matchup would look like, I'll just say that the Spurs, what I've noticed about them as I've watched them is that their level of not only connectedness that you mentioned, but their level of physical talent, apart from Wembanyama, is just very notable. Like Keldon Johnson, you mentioned as a six man of the year candidate. Keldon Johnson is not some like amazing defender, though he can play in a defensive scheme. And he's always been like a strong guy who was a downhill driver and everything. But he is just an absolute tank. Castle, as with his burst and how quickly he jumps off the ground and how strong he is, you know, yes, his jumper may not go in or may go in only sporadically, and it'll be like a discussion point for the other team. But the amount that he can just wear down an opponent, I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but between Castle, Wemby, and Carter Bryant, what I said when they drafted Bryant was that if there was going to be a team that was going to have a better defense than the Thunder for the next like 2 or 3 years, the only candidate I really saw was the Spurs because of those three. Castle is an outlier physical talent at guard at 6'5", 215, whatever he is. Bryant is an outlier athletic physical talent at wing. And Wembanyama's Wembanyama. And it's still too early. You know, Carter's not starting. He's just getting his first extended run now, taking advantage of it. That's great. But there is a skeleton here of a team that it's something more than the Rockets version last year that's like, we're just going to beat you up and, rebound the hell out of the ball. Because a lot of that was chained to, uh, their bigs just being physical bigs, like under the basket, turning everything into a scrum. There's something else about being able to close out harder, be more physical at the point of attack, uh, and punish on offense as well as defense with physicality, the way that the Spurs are set up to do. And you can't gear up to play these Spurs the way that the Warriors could sort of gear up to play the Rockets, because the Rockets, and I'm not like besmirching their two seed last year, but they're an Ime Udoka team, and Ime Udoka teams tend to be pretty like staid, stodgy, uncreative offensive teams. That was his case in Boston. It's the case now. That's what they're trying to play their way through. And Wembanyama as an offensive weapon just doesn't allow the opposing team to say like, okay, this is just going to be a physical battle and we're just going to have to slog our way through it and execute a little bit better in crunch time because we know their offense is going to screw up. Wembanyama just forces defenses to be engaged so much of the time, and his general like his headline attractiveness as a player, which is he will take layups away from the other team and be a constant, rim threat on offense. That is just going to carry over no matter what matchup they play. So could they run into a team like the Nuggets who can slow the game down, which would be to the Nuggets' advantage because the Spurs want to get out and run? And could the Nuggets generate better shots down the stretch in games? Sure, that could happen. But I want to be clear that I think that this Spurs team, has the potential to win the NBA championship this year.
For
I
sure.
really feel that. And
Yeah.
the resistance to that opinion is just sort of they haven't been there yet and da 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 da. and that's fine. I understand NBA history and how it all works, but you the playoffs unfold based on the matchups, and there is not yet a matchup answer for Wembanyama. And if your matchup answer is like you're gonna hope that Steph Castle gets tight and that his jumper doesn't go in, there are worse plans out there. I mean, every really good team presents sort of pick your poison kind of opportunities. But Castle is like, he's not just going to stand in the corner and wait to shoot a three that you're conceding to him. He will be involved as a screener, as a relocator, as a lob or cutting threat himself on the receiving end. If Wembanyama or Cornette, whoever the five is doing sort of hub touches at the top of the key, like they just they have a lot of ways to mess with you, including mimicking a little bit what the Thunder did last year in turning you over and then just juicing that into transition offense, which was the Thunder's signature all throughout the playoffs last year. I mean, I there's so many sort of live ball situations the Spurs can cause, both with their backcourt defense and just through, Wembanyama blocking shots, altering shots, securing missed layups that are deep in the paint to get out and run. Like I don't think that it's like Steph Castle may not shoot, Fox may not shoot, Harper may not be ready for big playoff minutes. Like smash the red button, the Spurs are not going to make it. There's enough physical talent here for them to go like to win the title. That's what I think. And I just want to make sure I'm on record nice and early about that. When you look at just sort of the scope of the Western Conference, you mentioned the Nuggets, but is there any other like are you a the Thunder are sort of waiting to like they're already really good and they'll flip another switch and find another gear as the year goes on and then just like run everyone off the court? Like is that sort of what you're expect? Would they be your favorite as just sort of they're likely to repeat and that's where you're at right now?
They'd be my favorite, but I wouldn't put it in terms that confident. I think that they are the best team. I think that they're going to be rightfully favored in every playoff series they're in. But I think the combination of Jalen Williams' thumb injury, kind of coming back, it's thumb, right? I think coming back from that and just
Mm-hmm.
not looking like himself is like something. I think that, I mean, Shea just had the abductor injury, but I don't think it's all injury based. I mean, I think it 25, 26 of the teams in the NBA are drawing dead against the Thunder unless they have those kinds of injuries matter a lot. But like the Spurs don't. And I don't think the Thunder do. I'm sorry, I don't think the Nuggets do either. I think that they can beat a fully healthy Thunder team. I think the Spurs have shown to be a good matchup for the Thunder, not to the extent that they would be favored in a 7 game series, but to the extent that the ways that the Thunder just win the game before the tip off, they do not do that against the
It's a
Spurs.
great way of putting
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
the Thunder are starting every game, or against 25 teams, they're starting games up um, 10-0 from the turnover margin. And they're not doing that against the Spurs when the Spurs have this plethora of guards to take care of the ball, right? So that's just one area where and we've seen it play out this year where I don't think the Spurs or Nuggets will be drawing dead against them by any means. So they can be better. The Thunder can be better than they've shown us, and they could lose series to either of those teams, and I wouldn't be very surprised.
Mm. Mm. Do you feel that since the trade deadline did just technically pass a week ago, the Spurs sort of with them being as good as they are, I think probably remove themselves from any sort of Giannis conversation very, very early on. Which for a small market team is very understandable in a vacuum. Uh, because disrupting a small market team is a little bit different than disrupting a big market team, and they are so homegrown and the way that they've developed this sort of hometown crowd. I got to go to a Spurs game last week, and that crowd was very unique among NBA crowds, to put it mildly. Uh, the way that their culture has like regenerated itself, they've always had a great culture, but like this new modern version of it, I can understand them not wanting to be like, we're gonna drop this gigantic elephant into the room in the middle of the season. But in a vacuum, in a vacuum, do you feel like they were a little too precious by immediately being like Castle's untouchable, Harper's untouchable? Like if they need to be on, then we just have nothing to discuss.
Not right now, because if you're not gonna make the trade now, then you want to just like negotiation strategy at this point. It's game theory. Like if you're not making the trade now and you ever think in the future there's a chance you might make the trade, then you want to have an anchoring position of like these guys are untouchable. And they were not making a trade now. They started out too hot. They're too good now. They could not make the trade at this deadline. If they flame out in the playoffs and one of their young prospects like completely underperforms and looks bad, then you can broach it in the summer. But I think it makes sense to have that standard position now of like these guys are untouchable. And in terms of like, I think Castle specifically, like, so preseason, I would have thought Harper is untouchable. Castle is only like, we're only discussing him if it is a Giannis trade. And then he played so well to start the year that I was like, gosh, he's actually, they're not even going to consider it this year. There's no way. Like the team is too good and Castle made a jump. Um, so I don't know. The team is not being too precious by not making a trade at this deadline or making a trade for Giannis this deadline. If they disappoint in the playoffs, then maybe they are inactive and I then say they are too passive. But they've been the third or fourth best team in the league this year. There's no way that you can say they were too passive this deadline. And they're building a timeline for the next 10 years, not the next 5 years. Like that's a big deal. Like they do not want to sacrifice the 2030s for the next 3 years. Like it's pretty clear and I think justifiable. So in that sense, like I'm the door on a potential Giannis trade is not closed, but it was not open right now.
Hmm. I tend to agree. I like that you put it in terms of negotiating philosophy and anchoring
Yeah.
positions. Are you do you maybe do something for a living or that comes in handy, Ben? Like I think Giannis and I tend on my show to not talk so much about sort of the superstars that keep the media content machine churning round and round throughout the year because if you want to hear about that stuff, you can go somewhere else. It doesn't interest me as much, but I think it is worth pointing out that there's a dissonance between everyone insisting, oh, Giannis is a top three player in the world, and also then bringing up all the complications that exist by trading for Giannis, whether it's injury related or contract related or chemistry related or fit related because he can't shoot. And the way that resolves to me is just that, like, Giannis is not one of the three or four, or in my opinion, like five best players in the world. It obviously is hurt by the fact that he has missed so much time this year relative to other years that makes it more difficult. And I don't want to do the sort of very easy analysis that he hasn't been out of the first round in the East since 2022, though that's true, because obviously there's more nuance to that about, he was hurt in a couple of those series and whatever. But if you need to significantly reorient your offense by trading for any given player, then that player is not as just automatically valuable as it seems. It's one of the sort of tenets I stand by over and over in my draft work is how important fit really is. And that's for drafting teams. If you're bringing someone in and you have the opportunity to have a whole summer and you're integrating like a very young, moldable player into your culture, I think fit is still very important, unless you're at the very top of the draft and then you sort of swing for the best talent, which we'll get to in a minute for this year. But especially when it's a player who's more set in their ways and used to a certain set of accommodations, like that guy, you better be able to see fitting into your culture very, very quickly. Because if not, there's going to be like a very like quick, harsh adjustment period where there may be collateral consequences you're not ready for. Maybe Giannis comes onto the Spurs and now, I don't know. Maybe now Castle really is having difficulty because Giannis wants to hold the ball more, and it's easy for Wemby to space around someone like that, but not so much for Castle, and or maybe like I don't know, Champagny becomes unplayable because he's not playing as many minutes and he's not in his rhythm as a shooter. Like there's so many different and like I don't think that Fox is an ideal pick and roll partner for Giannis. Like there's a lot of ways where I think that trade could have gone wrong. And I think the Spurs are correct for not making it right now. I also think that in a vacuum, I don't think Dylan Harper is ever going to be as good as Giannis. And I'm a little softer on Harper than I think most people are and was a little softer on him at draft time. He'd be the one I'd be more willing to talk about. But
Interesting. Really? Okay.
yeah, I had him third. He's very, very good, and I
So you
like
think
him.
he's a less valuable asset than Steph Castle?
Yes,
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
I
I
do.
don't, but it's close.
I don't think it's like a huge gulf or
Yeah.
anything like that.
Yeah.
But in short, I think that Castle can be like I don't think there's a big would you say that Dylan Harper is a better finisher around the rim than Castle or
Yes.
better prospect of finishing around the rim? I
Yes.
think he is a better, more creative finishing prospect, but I also think in the NBA, like Harper is great at solving problems
Hmm.
with someone on his hip around the
Yeah. Those
rim.
reverse pivots are crazy.
They're awesome. They're
Yeah.
really good. I think it's why he was drafted where he was drafted.
Uh-huh.
But the NBA is so well spaced and the Spurs are so well spaced with Wembanyama that like Castle doesn't it never gets to the point where Castle needs to have some sort of creative finish. He can just sort of jump and be off the ground quicker than you
Hmm.
and there's only one guy he has to get through and he's usually more physically talented than that person. Like I I tend to believe that Castle can like make all defense teams as one of the best guard defenders in the league down the line. And I think that Harper could, in the right circumstances, like be an all-star offensively,
Hmm.
but I would have trouble imagining that he's going to like climb Mount Everest of offensively tilted star guards and really be near the top of that heap. And that's hard to do. Sometimes you can be Jamal Murray and not make an all-star team and have the right partner and eventually win a title. But even so, Harper has his own kind of shooting questions. It's not as though
For
he's this
sure.
relentlessly efficient player yet. So I would say, even though there's a chance he makes multiple all-star teams, I first of all don't think that's assured. And secondly, I wouldn't I wouldn't hug him so tightly, especially with Fox in tow as well as Castle, because I think there are other looks that they can go to. That is how I would feel about him, trade wise. But I think that they were right to hold on to their cards now, because you know, the the way most title teams are form nowadays are to have whoever your 1A star is and surround that person with as much shooting as you possibly can. And, like I said, Giannis would throw a significant wrench into that. So that's sort of my piece on that part. Do you, if there were to be a move this summer to make, would you want to see it like all the chips in for Giannis, or what else was rumored, like a Trey Murphy, just sort of like
Right.
a wing shooter spacer that maybe even elevates what Champagny is giving you, that sort of
Right.
thing.
Yeah, I kind of lean the latter. And I think you made it you framed it well in terms of the benefits and the costs of, I mean, an actual team human aspect of messing with chemistry. I think the Spurs they're doing too well to roll the dice that things do get worse. Like any trade that's big like that, it brings some reward that just lifts you way higher, and it brings some downside that it just kind of causes you to tailspin and adjust. And when you're doing as well as you are, as the Spurs are doing on pace for 57 something wins, um, while being so young, that downside is just not worth it when you're doing so well to begin with. So yeah, I think that's right. And so I do lean towards the latter of a trade. A Trey Murphy type sounds really, really good, but then I keep seeing people talk about what Trey Murphy's value is, and I go, well, that's not that player. He's not that. He's not worth that. Like this is he's a guy who I feel like everybody 2 or 3 years ago was correctly like this guy is so underrated, and it's almost
Thank
become
you. Thank you.
so
Thank
big
you.
now that now today he's now become overrated, and the trade value for him like that's not that player. Like that's who we want that player to be. But that type is kind of right. That kind of fourth or fifth ancillary guy that like lifts the starting lineup. Um, but well, I mean, the playoffs will also determine a lot of it. If they have a really disappointing first round exit because one of these young guys just does not look like it looks different in the playoffs for a like identifiable reason, then like the Giannis converse like they'll talk about it. They'll talk about Giannis conversations or a bigger move that's not Giannis guys become available out of nowhere. Um, but over what we've seen this year, it just makes the most sense to finish your breakfast, see how this season plays out, and you'll probably be in a position where an ancillary move like that does the best. I mean, they're really big about flexibility. They're really, I mean, they didn't trade much for Fox. Like the Spurs front office is pretty, they want to keep flexibility for the next 10 years. So they'd have to be getting a bargain or just really feel strongly about something to like go all in this summer, I think.
Right. And it's not like I said before, the fit is not just in terms of play style as well. You want someone who understands they're lining up behind Wembanyama. I would imagine to be like it's culture building. This is what the
Yeah.
Thunder rely on so much. I mean, you can fetishize that a little bit and go a little bit too far with just wanting to collect personalities, but it is a part of the equation that you have to keep in mind. Uh, I guess a fun segue for that is into trade deadline stuff more broadly. I don't want to hit on this too much. It's just funny because I think of personalities and I want to talk about like James Harden on the Cavs.
Oh, that's great.
But the Harden trade was really the that I can really think of the only trade of any significance that a contender made to try to increase their chances of winning the NBA title.
The
Is that
only other,
correct? Am
there's
I?
two others. They're much smaller, but there's two others. There's the Thunder getting McCain and the
No, I don't
Timberwolves
count that.
getting Dosunmu.
Dosunmu's nice, but like even he is going to like maybe close games for them, and I think maybe more often than not will not close games for them.
I'm only thinking
So
of trades where contenders are even getting minutes from playoff guys. Yeah, the Harden trade is a tier above what I'm listing. But after those three, I don't know off the top of my head. I might be missing one or two where like a contender traded for someone who's going to play playoff minutes for them. So it's like
yeah.
Harden, those two, and that's it, I think.
So on the Harden deal, which has looked very good so far in like
Oh
his
yeah,
first couple games, I think they're playing tonight and they're beating the Wizards by a million, which
absolutely.
whatever, grain of salt.
Sam
But
Merrill started 9 for 9 from three.
I know. And Jared Allen 8 for 8 from the field. So they
There you
had some fun tonight.
go.
But Harden, like, just to contrast that with Giannis, I'm not saying that James Harden is a better player than Giannis because I do not believe that. But in terms of this is not the first time James Harden has been traded mid-season. And so he's used to reintegrating himself or integrating himself into a new environment. But like Harden is a guy who plays pick and roll. And if you're trading for Harden that you're going to hand over a lot of pick and roll duties to him. And it's probably going to help a big who likes to dive and be a rim threat in pick and roll. So as long as you have that on your team, the Cavs obviously do, then like replacing Garland for Harden, it's not completely seamless, but it is pretty seamless, especially since the concern with Harden on defense, like it's a different kind of concern for Garland, but the concern's still there. Like it's that is going to be a defensive question to resolve later, and maybe they switch more because Harden likes switching, but there was nothing within the constitution of that team, especially because Garland was missing time anyway, that you were really jeopardizing by bringing Harden in. That's why it made so much more sense to me than something like a contender bringing in Giannis. It'd be one thing if like the Heat traded for him because the Heat are
Right.
not a contender and they'd be looking to raise their floor immediately as well. But that's sort of the contrast I'm looking at. But do you believe like I mean Cleveland can probably puff out their chest now and say to themselves that we have the most talent on paper in the Eastern Conference. Do you feel as though like that's true? Would you favor them in the East right now? I mean, we could have a lot of the similar
Yeah.
things we're talking about with the Spurs with the Pistons, another team that
I
like
that's actually where I'm going. I know it's so I do think the Pistons are underrated. I think the Pistons' chances are getting undervalued because of the new kids on the block, because it's really rare. I think I saw a stat since the 95 Magic that a team that just has not made the playoffs like the two previous years would then win the conference or something like, or has not won a playoff series in the two previous years to then win the conference. I think that's what the stat was. Not since the 95 Magic. But I do think the
that's
Pistons.
an awesome stat. Is that
Yeah.
right?
That's what I read. I mean, yeah, I hope it wasn't fake news, but it was in an athletic article earlier today, so I'm guessing that they fact checked it.
So
Um,
repeat that again. A
I think it
team that
was
has
not since
not
the 95
won.
Magic that a
Yeah.
team that did not win a playoff series in either of the two previous years would then win the conference. I believe is I'm using memory, but that's what the
It's
athletic was.
okay. It's okay.
And I
Memory's
still buy
still
the
reliable,
Pistons.
Ben.
I
We're all
still
right.
buy the Pistons. I
So
think the
that's a
Cavs.
30-year sample size where if you go 2 years without winning a playoff series, you're not making the finals. Basically what you're saying.
What it was kind of saying, yeah. But
Excellent.
I have to.
Keep talking about the Pistons. Lovely
I,
stat.
I
Lovely
think
stat.
I think that the East this year is also different than most conferences in the playoffs. Like I think that stat is valuable. I think that the Pistons have shooting issues. I think the Cavs got a lot better with the Harden trade. And I gun to my head, I maybe pick the Cavs to win the East, but I think the Pistons have gotten I don't buy the argument that they're so new and so young that they're drawing dead in the East, which I do see that, or that they're fourth in the East. I do see that. I think they can win the East. I think they're really connected on both sides. I think that they're really good. And I'd be more persuaded by arguments about their spacing and their shooting and their reliance on Cade and stuff like that. But I think back to the Cavs, the Harden trade made them a lot better, gave them a much better chance to win the East, gave them a much better chance to get Donovan Mitchell to sign an extension this summer, which was the
Hmm.
primary point of the trade. They don't make this trade if Mitchell doesn't enthusiastically greenlight it. I think that the Harden fit right away. I mean, he said after their second game, he's like, we haven't practiced together yet. Like we've had a couple film sessions. They have not practiced together yet. And I mean, you see his pocket passes to Jarrett, which are a big deal. They can stagger Mitchell and Harden throughout the game, which is a huge deal. I think, yeah, Cavs. The trade was really good for them. I think that they
And Mobley's still hurt, by the way. I
he
mean,
is, yeah. I think
so
they kind of did the inverse of the Spurs, right? They sacrificed their future in 3, 4, 5 years because Harden is 10 years older than Garland to absolutely just maximize where they're at right now, which I think reflects the conference, which I think mostly reflects that they really need Donovan Mitchell to sign an extension this summer.
of
Um,
course.
so they had an inverse approach to the deadline of the Spurs, and I think it fits where they're at. And I liked the trade for them a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I liked it too. Thought it made sense. I don't, you know, I ironic like again, it's months away, but I don't think the Pistons are a great matchup for them, like that
Yeah.
specific matchup, because I think, they have some guys that can really bother Harden and wear him down and wear Mitchell down over the course of a playoff series. And I think they can still win on the glass in a way that has plagued Mobley and Allen in playoff series already. But it would be a competitive series. I just think I probably favor Detroit, especially if they had home court. But for Cleveland's purposes, I mean, right now they are fourth in the East, but a game out of third and a game and a half out of second. Celtics are still holding on to that 2 seed. Like everything you said about getting Mitchell to sign an extension. Donovan Mitchell's never been to the conference finals in his
Yeah.
career. So, what the Cavaliers really need to make sure they do is get on that 2-3 side of the bracket. Doesn't really matter which seed, but two is obviously better than three. And then they know that they're only going to have to beat either the Celtics with maybe Jason Tatum. And if it is Jason Tatum, then probably not a fully mid-season form version of Jason Tatum, sort of an unknown version of him, or they play the Knicks, who they've played before, and is not going to be easy, and the Knicks aren't going to be afraid of them. But I would rather, if I'm them, be like, we just need to win that series to get to the conference finals finally, and then take our chances, because that, I think, is mission accomplished as far as like presenting yourself to Donovan Mitchell as like sign an extension here. Like, this is progress. We made the conference finals. This is where we need to be. And I would rather, ideally with home court, but play one of those two teams than play a team that's had a top two defense the entire year, who I know is like absolutely going to beat the hell out of my bigs. So like that's sort of where I'm at with the Cavs, and I thought it was worthy gamble, correct sort of calculation to make, right time to make the deal. Um, any other trade deadline thing you want to talk about before we go draft, or
Yeah,
uh,
before I just want to, I think you make a good point about the Cavs seating there. I think we're aligned in that we see Detroit as a less favorable matchup than New York or Boston. And I don't know if that's the consensus. We might both be higher on Detroit and or lower on those other teams if we're both feeling that way about the Cavs matching up. And for you, it might just be a matchup thing, but I also just kind of buy Detroit. But I have good news about the Cavs schedule going forward. It might be the easiest in the NBA. It's definitely the
really?
five easiest going forward. Yeah, they play a very funny number of tanking teams the rest of the way. So I think considering they're 9-2 in their last 11, considering Strus should be back soon, although it's really odd how long this has lasted. But if they get Strus back with this easy schedule, I think they can get the 2 or 3 line and feel pretty good. And then yeah, making the conference finals is like just it's not the goal, but like it's also kind of like it's the minimum that they need, right?
Right. I
Um,
mean, they are on their own little. We lost in the first round. We lost in the second round. We lost in
Most
the second
expensive
round.
roster, second apron, all
Yeah.
that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's where they need to go. Okay. So we're gonna pivot now to the draft, this draft cycle, and I want to talk about the number one pick in the draft. So for those who have not necessarily been following, the narrative since the beginning of the season is that there's three candidates for the number one pick: Darryn Peterson from Kansas, Carlos Boozer, or pardon me, Cameron Boozer, Carlos Boozer's son, Cameron Boozer at Duke, AJ Dybantsa at BYU. I spoke at length about Boozer in the last episode of my feed, which you can check out, but uh, I will frame this discussion in saying that I actually I think this is as fascinating a debate about the number one selection as there's been in a few years, because I don't think they are the only three candidates for that pick. But who I'll just start with, like, who have you seen that you think is the best talent in this class so far? Like, who would be number one on your board, so to speak, if you had to release one today?
Probably Darryn Peterson.
Hmm.
I I think that
And just as a brief primer, Darryn Peterson is like, number one guy coming out of high school. Maybe Boozer was technically ranked above him. I don't know or care, but it was all right there. He is a flamethrower shooter who is like well built at 6'5", 6'6". He's playing off another point guard in Kansas and Melvin Council, but probably profiles as someone that you could build an entire offense around because he's that nuclear of a shot maker. And I think a very good, if not great, passer with like a clear feel for the game in causing deflections on the other end, like not a sieve by any stretch on defense, and like an affirmative playmaker on defense in the way that sort of like Shea kind of can be for the Thunder, be sort of like neutral to maybe even positive on defense for a great defensive team. So it's a very good case, but go ahead.
yeah, yeah. I think the high school history of that, I don't grind this as much as closer as other people, but from what I can tell is that Peterson was not top two for most of the high school years. And then the kind of his last year of high school made a crazy jump, especially on defense, that kind of lifted him to being number one going into this year. But yeah, I think that it's really cool how the top three, they all dominate in such different ways, both in terms of like their skills and their positions on the court, and in terms of their mindset and how they approach the game. They all three dominate in such different ways, and they're all amazing. I think they would all be the number one pick in like a median NBA draft. And to think that
Interesting.
Flag could have been in this draft class to make it four, which would have just been like the best draft of my lifetime. Even without Flag, it might be because a lot of these like kind of lower freshmen have exceeded expectations too.
Hmm.
Um, but there have been different days throughout the year where I would have given you a different order of the top three. But most of those days, including today, I would probably have Darren number one. I think that he's a relentless player on the court in a way that like we don't see very often. I think he's just trying. He is so adamant about winning every possession on both sides of the court on his terms, and he just does not look his age. Like he just it's kind of a cliche when and I kind of roll my eyes when most people use this, the idea that oh he just looks different. But he really does. He's a guard prospect like I haven't really seen in the last 5, 10 years. So that's just from what I've seen on the court. Obviously, with Darren, there comes some questions or concerns with how much he's on the court or off the court stuff. And so I guess if I were a GM, I would want my medical staff to do a really, really thorough job and talk to them. And if they gave me the green light, I would probably have Darren number one on my board, regardless of who I was in terms of if I were an NBA team. But Cam and AJ are also good enough to where like I'm open-minded to being persuaded about this. And they're also good enough that like if someone were concerned about Darren's kind of like ancillary off the court concerns and they wanted to go elsewhere, it's not crazy, right? It is that close and they're all three that good.
Okay, so you don't never want to speculate, even though this is a speculative podcast that I put in my little intro, but not in sort of a damaging way. The off-court stuff that you're alluding to, my understanding of off-court stuff is just that like he has his agency that's very protective of his interests. And so there have been times where he has sat out of halves or sat out of whole games. Most
Mhm.
recently, he was like a late scratch before Kansas played the number one team in the country, Arizona, at home earlier this week. And then
Yep.
Kansas won the game without him, which was pretty cool, quite frankly. But like, there is a narrative developing around Darren that like, oh, maybe for whatever reason, he's letting some camp dictate to him when to play and when not to play. And wouldn't that be kind of a red flag? I've heard nothing of like him being like having bad character or bad
Same.
teammate or anything like that. So I want to make sure
Absolutely.
we're putting
No,
that to
teammates
the
seem to
side.
love him. Yeah, I should clarify that. I don't mean off the court the way I think 80% of off the court gets used. Yeah, no,
Right,
Derek's
right.
character seems A plus, which is why part of why he's my number one. Like I buy all of that to the fullest extent. It's just
So,
like what he's just played so much fewer minutes, and that's also not just this year. That was a thing in high school too. So I just bring it up to be like, I guess why he's not like my stone cold, no question number one. If
so
that
what was it a medical issue? Because I don't know the answer to this. Was it a
no.
medical issue in high school that
Nobody
led to
knows the
it being a
answer. I
similar?
don't know. No one knows. Like, it would just be a huge AAU tournaments where like people I didn't people would go and be like, I don't know if Darren's even playing this weekend. And that's just kind of not something you hear about like high school kids. And then it just like happens here too. So I don't know. I don't know if many people know. The last thing I want to do is act like I know when I don't. It's just a
Right,
I
of
don't, it's not
course.
even I don't even know if it's a concern. It's just a question of like I don't know how many people know for sure, which is like, okay, then I don't know what to make of it. So
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. So I agree that I think that Peterson is the best sort of basketball talent that I've seen. You know, when he is on, like there's no other player like him, especially because with these other two, Boozer and Dybantsa, there's a like I think a legitimate question as to how effective they're going to be, even as 3-point shooters relative to the NBA median. Boozer's the more talented shooter out there now. Dybantsa is the more dynamic off the dribble player, so he can probably get to his three more easily than Boozer can, but his three doesn't really go in yet. Not, I mean, it's been last couple games been better, but
Yeah.
in general, that's been a weakness for AJ. And Boozer is not like a crazy athlete, so that three, he prefers to play out of the post as a big burly power forward, and so you just it's a little bit of a question as whether or not those two are like stone cold three level scoring talents. And there is no such question with Peterson. I mean,
Yeah.
that is front and center about him. Uh, his situation, I guess, is most reminiscent of Shaden Sharp's in 2022. I mean, obviously there were probably differences, but Shaden was another guy, 6'5", very athletic scoring guard, shot maker, who I guess reclassified, which is different than Peterson's situation, but joined Kentucky mid-season, um, and then just didn't play. Like
Yeah.
joined sometime December, January, and there was a little bit of mystery as to whether or not they were planning on integrating him or what. And eventually he just didn't play. Didn't play that entire season and ended up getting drafted eighth, seventh,
Seventh, I
seventh
think. Yeah, yeah.
to Portland.
Yep.
And Shaden's a good player and is, I think, has continued to tantalize people throughout his time there. Like he'll go off and average 25 a night for a month, but there will be some efficiency questions here and there. And his defense has not been always consistent. And he's not a lead guard because he doesn't have the reps running a team. And so he's just sort of in this kind of limbo space where he's obviously talented, but I think the Blazers maybe are reluctant to be like, we are building our team around Shaden Sharp. Uh, Peterson is a better player with like more of a proof of concept than Sharp. I think that when I first watched him, I thought about Shea because of I think the defensive floor raising that he can provide. If he is sort of like quote unquote the defensive target on your team, then your team probably has a really, really good defense. An easy player to build around. And someone who, you mentioned that there wasn't a team for which you think you would have taken Boozer or Dybantsa over him. That's because Boozer and Dybantsa require certain accommodations in roster construction, even to unlock their offense. And neither one of them profiles as like an all defense player, even though they're bigger than Darryn. Like Darryn, because of the shooting talent and scoring talent that he's got, you can imagine him playing off of a more high usage guard, playing off of a high usage wing, being a high usage initiator himself, being a guy that you're using as a movement shooter, as an on the ball scorer, as a screener in inverted pick and roll. Like he is just a much more dynamic offensive talent in a league that is incredibly reliant and revolving around dynamic offensive talents. So I agree that like this stuff about him in high school not necessarily playing as much is definitely strange. I'm not going to write that off, but the even though like Boozer's numbers are like really, really good and AJ when he's on is amazing, I still think in terms of basketball talent that Darryn is head and shoulders above them if I'm making a selection. Um, but there are another, in my opinion, three players that at least merit a mention. And I think you are seeing them increasingly mentioned as sort of like the next three guys. I don't think there's anyone super surprising I'm going to name here. But Caleb Wilson, North Carolina, who I discussed on my last episode with Brian, Kingston Flemings, point guard Houston, Keaton Wagler, point guard Illinois. So is there anyone I'm leaving off? Or
No.
first of all, for you, and second of all, do you think that these three like are a solid tier below to where they don't really belong in a conversation where we're talking about number one? If so, that's okay. I'll make my
Yeah.
case, but I just
I
want
think
to.
Wagler is a tier below what we're talking about. It's really hard for me to be like, yeah, I would take Wagler two or three. I don't know if I can get there. And he's amazing and he's really fun and he's really good. But if we're talking about like translation questions and stuff like that, yeah, I think Flemings and Caleb, I'm very open to the case for as a top three players.
So
They're
who
both
would you rather make the case for out of Flemings or Caleb?
who would I rather make the case
Yeah, I
for?
want to hear you make a case. You're good at making cases. I'd like to hear it.
Uh, I think that I think that Flemings has enough upside and just from the jump goodness. Like, do you think Flemings is a better prospect than Dylan Harper? Because I feel like you probably maybe do, and I think
Oh,
it's like pretty
I
sound.
do. Yes, I do.
Yeah, his ability to get to the rim, his ability to play off ball and on ball. I mean, his poise is really crazy. Like he's just always under control. I don't know how Kelvin Sampson just seems to kind of regenerate amazing guards that I love watching like a Hydra, but like they seem to keep getting better. And I mean, Fleming's his decision making on his drives, his ability to kind of, I think, take over when he needs to also get his teammates involved when like he should. He just seems like in total control in a way that's like not domineering or distracting from a team that's really talented and should get touches around. Like he kind of has a hand on the throttle in terms of what he needs to do and when in a way that's like just really weird for a freshman guard. And the rim pressure should translate. And yeah, I would like pretty seriously listen to a case for Flemings at 2 or 3. Yeah, he's just outstanding, and it's just consistent. I don't know.
I love it. Um, I've said when I've like done my little like clips and commentary on Twitter that if Flemings were 6'5" in socks, which is what I think around what Darryn is, if
Right.
he were Darren's size, I would prefer Flemings as a prospect. But he is whatever he is, 6'3" in socks, and he's
Mhm.
skinny. He doesn't have broad shoulders or anything. And the way that affects him in his game is that he does not draw a ton of free throws. He's a guy who relies on his burst because his burst is remarkable, but that burst he uses to try to like get to the rim and get a layup up over a big guy and score. He is very ethical. He wants to score the ball in play and
Yeah.
he doesn't really have like the grifter gene that a lot of players have. I love that about him. It makes me love
Yeah.
him more. But in terms of translation, if you're going to be like a slightly undersized guard, which I think he's probably slightly undersized, you need to leverage every advantage that you possibly can. And he also doesn't, he shoots threes well, but not super high volume. I think he's at like six threes per 100. Usually for a guard prospect, you want it to be, eight or nine minimum per 100, really get that volume up. And it's but the reason he doesn't do that is because no one can stay in front of him and he can always beat someone off the dribble. So he usually gets to wherever it is that he wants to go. I just like there are built-in margins in his game that are a little bit narrower, to say nothing. I mean, you mentioned Dylan Harper, and I'm glad you did because there's just so many guards that he's going to be competing against every single night, and he could look amazing for 2 consecutive months and then have like 3 bad weeks shooting the ball, and it like his perception is going to swing low in the NBA because of that. So I think that, but I think as a dribble, pass, shoot sort of decision maker, initiator, I think he has like the best tape in the draft when it comes to the decisions that he makes, like possession after possession after possession, where he goes, where the ball goes, and just sort of how he's adding value to Houston. Like I love watching him.
What do you think of like a Chauncey Billups comp for him?
I don't know. Kingston seems to be like a good person. So,
Okay, I mean on the court. Yeah, yeah.
well, wait,
But
I
Chauncey
didn't.
Billups with better decision making off the court. Yeah.
I I could have finished my sentence with, and so Chauncey is too, and so it's a good comparison. But hey, I don't know what you're referring to. No,
Hmm.
I don't. I wouldn't say Chauncey. I think it wasn't Chauncey in his day for his era considered like a very physical, like big guard
Yeah,
relative to his
definitely.
competition.
Yeah, I don't know if the frame's ever going to come. That is a big difference. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I don't know. The way that I thought about him is sort of like a I would class him with Tyrese Maxey. And
Yeah.
maybe like Maxey's 3-point shot and pull-up game have really come along very rapidly, and that
Hmm.
would be a big leap, I think, for Kingston to get there. But he'll have the chance to because teams are going to be so terrified of him driving that they'll go under screens. And it's not like Kingston has bad touch. He doesn't. So he'll get the opportunity to build up his 3-point volume and pretty quickly in the league. But
Yeah,
as
if
yeah,
Maxey were if Maxey were a little worse at shooting, but I think like Flemings I would say is like a little bit of a better passer. Or
I
I
agree.
right. So it's kind of like yeah, if you can toggle one skill for the other. That's an
But
interesting point. Yeah.
and because they play with such burst and such like relentlessness, they can both sort of wear the other team down. Like your shoes need to be laced up very, very tight, or else like they will embarrass you over the course of a game. So I also think that Kingston is probably maybe like a better college defender. You know, Maxi played for Calipari
I
and
know.
nothing
Yeah.
made sense. And Kelvin Sampson's culture is much different. But
Yeah.
I do think that like Kingston is just so well conditioned and can just play all night long that I think, I feel comfortable saying he and Maxi are like a similar tier of guard
Yeah,
prospect, which
makes
is
sense.
very high praise.
Yep.
Um, in comparing them to Boozer and Dybantsa, if I would take them over one or the other, it's hard because if you have a point guard you really like, are you really going to take Flemings to play alongside that point guard, or are you going to take a swing on one of those like bigger guys who are just sort of rarer with their size, both being, 6'9" or whatever they both are? I think there's probably, if I'm like the Kings and I can take anybody and Peterson's off the board, I would think long and hard before passing on Kingston Flemings.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Um, yeah, that's he is and I'm so open to it. So I for me that's probably like an auto cam. I'm probably taking Boozer. But I mean obviously like I'm not really worried about fit at all at this point, you know what I mean? But
I understand.
yeah,
And
I think Boozer is a good enough prospect where like I don't know. I'm tempted sometimes to have Boozer a tier above Flemings, Caleb, and maybe even AJ.
I will. There's been a lots of time this year where I've had him just there, where it's like
Yeah.
Peterson, Boozer, space, and then we have the
It does
discussion.
change as the year goes on for me too.
But
It's interesting.
my my impression of Boozer is that he he would be a great player for the Kings because like Flemings, he's a culture setter and he is a floor raiser. Like I think that Boozer will, like, especially this time of year when there's some teams tanking, as long as Boozer's playing, like he will crush bad teams. If you like are not on your P's and Q's and keeping a body in front of him and making sure that you're in position when he catches the ball, like he'll have, 25 and 15
Yeah.
by the end of the third quarter. Like he is like a very fundamentally sound, consistent guy in the paint. My and I can't ever, like, I would be very, very surprised if I don't have Boozer in like the top three in whatever configuration my final board is in. Uh, my question with him is more of a ceiling kind of, do I think he is a gifted enough scorer and overall offensive player around which you can just sort of organize an entire offense? And like it's not, maybe that's oversimplifying it because there's so many good offensive players in the NBA that he can be part of a more sort of egalitarian scheme where he has an all-star teammate at guard and maybe another all-star teammate on the wing and whatever, and things are just much easier for him. But at a base level, he likes to like bang into people and muscle past them, and he enjoys that sort of physicality, and he's 18 years old and strong as an ox, so he'll probably be one of the strongest players in the league in his prime, so he'll still be really good. but I I do think there is a little bit of a ceiling on guys who rely on strength as their like foremost sort of advantage creation skill. So to use a draft Twitter term, if you're focusing on strength to clear space all of the time, eventually you just run into NBA defenders who are just very, very smart and are going to be able to absorb you and just sort of slow you down. And that's what I see with Boozer when he's faced like really, really good teams. He finds ways to get his numbers because like he'll get out in transition. He's a great outlet passer. Duke has a good defense. They can turn other teams over. Like he can get to his stuff, but I have seen him kind of get slowed down to the point where he's not just it's not a foregone conclusion when he catches the ball that the other team is just in deep deep trouble. Like I watched UNC Duke and I thought that when he was one-on-one with Caleb Wilson, Caleb did a very good job on him. Now Caleb's another one of these guys we're going to talk about, but I there have been a couple other times. I think Michigan State was another time where I saw this happen. It's just I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling, but it's just
Do you think that those drop-offs you talk about that you've seen from Boozer when either he plays tough competition or you've seen, do you think those drop-offs are bigger, more serious, like than the drop-offs that we've seen from AJ when he plays tough
I
competition?
prefer Boozer to AJ.
As
So
do I.
no,
Okay.
I don't
Yeah.
think
Okay.
like yeah. AJ's are more concerning because to me that has more to do with uh AJ making choices, but them not necessarily being like the right choices. And like AJ, even though I think that Cam can put himself in less than ideal scenarios, Cam still has stuff that he can go to. AJ gets himself into situations that I think are like affirmatively like problem situations sometimes.
Yeah.
When AJ plays a bad college team, he looks like the number one pick because he like if you don't have a body on him and you don't like it's the same principle, but AJ punishes you all the more because of how well he can drive and finish if you're not showing him bodies. But if you do show him bodies, he will drive himself into like non-productive scenarios. And, I think AJ has actually gotten better over the course of the season.
For sure.
I think he's relying on his sort of turnaround jumper less and resetting and attacking a little bit more frequently.
He got to the
And
rim against Baylor last night way more than like that's what I want to see from him is what he did last night against Baylor. Yeah, he got
and
to
I actually thought in the loss at Houston, I think
Mm,
last week, I thought he played pretty well as
great.
well. And so I'm clocking that he is getting better, which is why my top three will probably just be the same annoying top three. But it's still like I would want him to show more just overall touch with the ball if he's going to shoot so much in the mid range and from three. And we'll see. But that's sort of
Yeah.
where I'm at with AJ right now.
Same here. And it does, I mean, it feels like AJ is probably going to get drafted ahead of Boozer.
Probably.
Yeah, based on stuff right now, I just, you look at like the last 6 years, this is going to be like I mean, I feel like when we have this kind of what I call gap near the top of the draft where like there's one player that I think mostly everyone would seemingly agree that Boozer is right now a better basketball player than AJ. But the case for AJ, why AJ will get drafted ahead of him probably is because the idea that he has a higher upside or a higher ceiling, or he's going to surpass him and be a better NBA player in a few years because of XYZ. And it's just, is that XYZ persuasive enough? I feel like to have me rank, I think what is like comfortably the inferior basketball player right now over the guy who's better and who was also better in high school, worth saying. But I don't know. I think about the last few years and I feel like we did the gap between AJ and Boozer is smaller than all of these names I'm going to mention. But like at the time, I think everyone kind of agreed Luka was better at basketball than Ayton or Bagley, but they would surpass them. I think everyone kind of agreed Evan Mobley was better at basketball than Jalen Green, but he went higher because of some upside. And even like I don't know, Chet and Paolo. Like I thought Chet was a better basketball player than Paolo, and I think there were people who thought that, but still thought Paolo should go one because of the idea of upside. And I don't know. Boozer's better at basketball. He has been for a while. He's 6 months younger. I don't want to miss the forest for the trees, and that's maybe not detailed enough, but like he's more than a little bit better right now. You know what I mean? So um, it's interesting. We'll see if
No,
AJ goes higher. I don't know.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I think that's right. Like you draft AJ, it means that you're putting the ball in AJ's hands because you certainly wouldn't draft him to really play off of someone. Boozer is arguably, actually, probably not even arguably, to me is a better decision maker with the ball in his hands, but can also play without the ball. And so that alone, to me, makes him a more attractive option than Dybantsa. Um, yeah, I already went on my spiel and kind of
Okay.
ran out of gas about him, like, and how he just I really do feel like his preference for banging in the post. I just don't. I find it hard to find other superstars that really operate that way unless they just have the best touch imaginable. And Boozer has really good touch, but I don't know that it's profiling at like all NBA kind of levels. And he also is 6'9". He's not 7 feet. You
Right.
know, so like
Yeah.
it's that kind of stuff that keeps kind of cropping up for me with him.
It makes a lot of sense. I think maybe the not the counter, but the Boozer optimism would be like he is going to win in other ways than he's showing right now because this is the way he can win in college. And like you mentioned earlier, how fundamentally sound he is, and I think that's kind of like why I'm less concerned about
Yeah.
that. You know,
Great passer. Great
yeah, I mean, he
passer.
is like in some ways the most polished freshman big man like in a long time. Um, so it's like the strength stuff might not translate, but then if he is able to win with, he just always takes advantage of what's given to him, and I think he can win with ways other than strength. He hasn't maybe needed to show it in as many of these college games, but you know, it was kind of like do you remember like the Alperen Şengün tape from Turkey and like the narrative of him was like, well, he wins in this way, but that's not gonna really translate to the NBA. It's like, well, yeah, he just adapted quickly because like I don't know, sometimes I just feel like dominant players just tend to find ways to keep dominating. So maybe I'm leaning on it too much with him. But like, could he
I
be
mean,
like a
yeah, I
more?
mean, we're discussing do you draft him one or two or three? You know, it's not like I mean, Şengün
Yeah, yeah,
went
yeah, 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 yeah.
15th, you
Right.
know, or
No, for
16th,
sure.
whatever it was.
Yeah, yeah, no,
So
good.
so like I don't know. I he will find ways to be a very productive NBA player for sure. It's just, you know, when you're not the best athlete and you're also not the most like creative in the way that you score and you also don't necessarily have like lethal touch, although he's pretty close, then there's just enough paper cuts there that
Yeah,
I will compare you to other really really good players. That's all.
yeah.
Now Wilson, who I do want to talk about as someone who I don't know about number one for Caleb, but he I'll just ask you, who do you think Caleb Wilson reminds you of? If you had to do a quick comp for Caleb Wilson, what would you say?
I feel like I've made comps for almost the entire top 10 except for him. I feel like there's someone on your mind. Who are you thinking of?
I've thought of different people. I
Yeah.
when I spoke about him on my previous episode, I mentioned, you know, we me and Brian talked about like Cam in comparison to his dad and like how his shot form was, and I was like, well, if you're looking for a power forward from that era, maybe Amari Stoudemire would be one that comes to mind for Caleb. I think Amari was probably even bigger and stronger than Caleb was. I was watching him today, and I almost thought of like Siakam entered the league at a much older, like a much later age. I think he was like 22, 23, coming out of New
Yeah.
Mexico. But similar body type and similar reputation for having a very high motor. By the time Siakam entered the league, he had more practice at the sort of like point forwardy skills that he would show. And Siakam kind of added the in between mid range game later. Caleb kind of has the the in-between mid-range game now as sort of what his bread and butter is on offense when he's not dunking. Uh, and UNC doesn't like run any pick and roll for him, like annoyingly, in my opinion. I think that they should, but they don't really. So you like his point forward skills are a little bit iffy. But out of everyone we talk about in this episode, Caleb is probably the furthest from what his theoretical ceiling is. Not to say that he will reach it, but like when you talk about scratching the surface or whatever of what you can be, Caleb really comes to mind because the type of touches that he has on offense for UNC are like not really typical NBA touches because he sets up, 15 to 18 feet from the rim, and a lot of it's in ISO. And a lots of times he just shoots over someone or he kind of drives into someone and takes a weird angle, but he's so athletic that he can draw a foul or make shots that don't seem like he should be able to make. And it doesn't look NBA-ish. The athleticism looks NBA-ish, but the shot diet not necessarily. And so I have found myself thinking like coaching is going to matter a lot for him. Obviously, how he chooses to build out his game and the point guard that he plays with is going to matter a lot for what kind of touches he gets. But you can, if he goes to Indiana, they keep their pick and they get Caleb Wilson, and he's like running and running and running and running and running and playing with Pascal Siakam, that could turn into one version of him. If he goes to Sacramento and he plays the different point guard and a different head coach every year, and he's trying to build out his point forward skills there, it could go in a much different direction. So it makes it hard to envision that this guy should go number one in a draft like this when Peterson is sitting there. But I can't shake the fact that you want to go after dominant players, players that have a pathway to dominance, who,
Hmm.
and I think that Caleb does have a pathway to being a pretty dominant player. Like the stuff the fact that he hits the shots that he hits and that he can be as versatile on defense, especially in recovery. His recovery tools are what are so outstanding about him. Um, and what does he lead like UNC in points, rebounds, steals, and blocks? Like he just he is a box score stuffer who still scores efficiently despite not taking the most efficient shots. What the NBA does is increases the efficiency of your looks generally. So if you can project that this is going to be like the least efficient version of what that player is, and you bring along the rest of the stuff that he can do, then I think the world in which he's the best player in the draft is one where obviously his context hits for him, but that none of the other guys are like true 1A offensive options, which is my concern for someone like AJ or Boozer. Peterson is sort of the top line, and this sort of off-court stuff would need to, I guess, manifest itself for that to be the case. But I think the world exists where you look up and AJ's been averaging, 25 and 10 on pretty efficient stuff while being like near all defense on the other side. That could be the best player in the draft. That's sort of where I feel about him.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. So it's interesting you're finding you're kind of discerning traits where it's like these are traits that are likely to strengths that are likely to translate to the NBA and weaknesses that are like almost likely to be ironed out. And so I'm not going to say he's more raw, but it's like he's being this good and winning with kind of XYZ weaknesses that you think NBA teams can kind of like diminish. While accentuating some of the strengths that maybe UNC is holding him back from, like you talk about the pick and roll usage or something like that. Yeah, I mean, that's just pretty interesting. And the way you describe him and the way I was thinking about him after you asked for comparisons is like, they approach offense differently, but just kind of the broad terms, kind of like Scotty Barnes or like a souped up Scotty Barnes if things kind of go right for him. Where like the cleanup gap filler, kind of floor raising stuff is so set. And then if things click with either kind of just the shooting season he's having or a roster, like then the offense kind of comes on top of that. And you talk about like, oh, he's like borderline all defense while also like contributing these other ways, and the shot that gets better. So yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting path, and it's like I I don't know if I trust like some of the offensive skill to get polished to the point of lifting that ceiling to a crazy degree, which is also kind of the Scotty Barnes thing, but I don't know if that comparison makes any sense to you.
It does, but I think in at heart, Caleb is more of a play finisher. Scotty's more of a playmaker, which is a meaningful
Okay.
difference.
Yeah.
Um, but I think Caleb's a really, really, really good play finisher. That's
Yeah.
why, like, there's no shortage of guards in the NBA, And so chances are, let's say the Kings do draft him. The Kings will get a point guard. It might be like Ja Morant on a weird discount or whatever over the summer, but like there will be a talented person playing point guard with Caleb Wilson within 18 months of his entry into the NBA. And the concern about him would be if he sort of matured in an environment where he just couldn't find a good point guard to play with. But I felt that this way about Mobley because I had Mobley number one in his year, where yes, you could build an offense around Cade, but my question was, how good is that offense going to be if Cade is at the controls versus with Mobley at the time? I was like, this guy could be defensive player of the year, is an underrated offensive talent in his own right. And the right offense will find him just because of that's the nature of the league. And the Cavs did get very good pretty quickly with him. And it's ironic that maybe Mobley plays Cade in the playoffs. We'll see how that
Yeah.
goes. But Caleb is a similar sort of idea, different player than Mobley, but a similar idea where like I'm not worried about his offense just getting nuked at the NBA because I think the NBA is just too good at offense to like maybe it takes a little while, maybe he has like a delayed Aaron Gordon kind of rise, but even so, Caleb has these little moments. First of all, like I don't buy that he's a complete non three-point shooter because he's too good at these like really hard mid-range shots, like these hard ISO mid-range shots where if he were bad at them, like he would have hit a slump a
Yeah.
long time ago, and he just doesn't. So, and he's really good at drawing contact and free throws because he's just more athletic than the guy he goes up against. And that's likely to stay that way in the NBA. That's how good of an athlete he is. That's the sort of like athletic dominance you want to bet on. So like twitchiness and feel and motor, I think he's probably overrated as a defensive prospect because I've seen him space out here and there off the ball, and I've seen him get beat off the dribble, particularly by like small, slippery guards. And like if he thinks that like guarding Boopy Miller is tough on an island, then like have fun with Donovan Mitchell next year. So
Yeah.
like that, I I think that he's a bit overstated in that respect. But when UNC manages to run offense through him and get him touches, that's when his motor really revs up and you see this two-way impact that is so enticing. Two-way impact like at a level that I don't think that Boozer or Dybantsa reliably get to. End to end, playing with pace, of just affecting possessions on both sides over and over and over again. That's where like the ceiling really shows itself to me and what I find so enticing about him.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, the two-way, he probably is more balanced. Some would argue that makes him possibly more scalable. It could argue it gives him higher upside. I don't know if it does, but yeah, he in terms of like two-way balance on the two sides, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm trying to think like Barnes is a good one, but like Siakam, I don't know.
Siakam's just so like Siakam to me is like there's no one in the NBA who's both bigger and faster than Siakam. Like just the speed at his size is so unique that I struggle to like compare anyone to him, but I absolutely see what you mean in terms of like role and versatility for sure.
Yeah. And so you think that Mr. Wagler is a tier below a lot of these gentlemen. I can understand why.
Probably.
Yeah. Not the athlete that Kingston Flemings or Caleb Wilson are, doesn't have the pedigree of the top three,
I don't,
certainly.
yeah, I don't care about that, but it's a
It's a
little, it's interesting.
tell me what you think. Is it the athleticism, like the athletic
Mostly, yeah,
limitation?
it mostly
Yeah.
is. It mostly is. And then it's like there is a certain percentage of a reality where he is on like a really crazy heater right now, and that if that regresses like a little bit, then you're really like left with someone just levels below what we're talking about. And I don't think that regression, that fear of regression exists with the strengths of the other prospects, which maybe makes them a little bit riskier. And then if you add on top of that, the lack of athleticism like does reduce rim pressure and defense. You then also could argue that it gives them a lower upside than someone who like has these just like dominant physical traits and like they can improve their skill. Wagler can't get that much bigger and that much more pop. You know what I mean? And so now you're talking lower floor and lower ceiling. And that's where I'm like, okay, I'm so pumped with him 5 through 10, 4 through 8. I don't know. But like, wow, you're going to say none of those top five have like a higher floor ceiling combo than Wagler? Like, you must think he's like underperforming in the shot making then. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it gets kind of the margins become slim, which does not mean they can't hit. Like, outlier, we're trying to predict outliers here, but it becomes you're walking a tightrope at that point.
So, so I would say here's my case for
Hmm.
Wagler, who is, by the way, like 18 years old, and I think probably I would say he is at least 6'5" in socks. A good chance that he is 6'6" in socks. Okay, so he's like clearly bigger than Kingston Fleming.
Hmm. Yep.
Out of the six, including him, Peterson, Boozer, Dybantsa, Flemings, Wilson, he is the second best shooter of the ball behind Darryn Peterson. I think out of these six, he has either the very best like offensive feel or maybe the second or third best. I think like Flemings probably has the best case as just feel for the game, like we said, decision after decision after decision, and he can access more passes more reliably than Wagler can. So I think Flemings is probably a better passer. But Flemings has, or pardon me, Wagler has a really impressive knack, in my opinion. And this is what you hear like commentators talk about, like how he never gets sped up. He plays at his own pace, all this kind of stuff. He has a very reliable knack for keeping himself out of bad spots and putting himself in good spots on the floor. Now he plays in a really good offense.
Yeah, he
It's
does.
really well spaced with a
Yeah.
lot of like jumbo sized guys who can shoot. So that certainly helps. But a lot of these other guys also play with a lot of talent as well. Wilson is probably in the worst basketball situation out of all the guys we mentioned. Um, but like even with Illinois' stuff, Wagler still like they still revolve around him. Yes, there might be 5 minute stretches where he does little pick and pops and it's just or he does a short roll pass to Ivasic and he swings it to the corner or whatever, and they just start raining threes, and he's helpful, but not really the straw stirring that drink. But there's been enough that I've seen from him where, first of all, if they really like need a bucket, they're going through him. He is empowered with more decision making than anyone else on that team. And he is, first of all, like to this point, you mentioned regression, so who knows? To this point, he has been a reliable ISO shooter, not only from three, but like from range from
Yeah.
three. And to me, the athletic limitation in his game is just his last step when he gets to the hoop. He doesn't have any real juice off of his last step, which is why he has no dunks yet on the season. And that matters, but he strikes me as someone who, because he is so poised, I can imagine him figuring out a way to play off of 2 feet very reliably. My comp for him is like different body type but similar play style to Jalen Brunson.
Oh,
Brunson's footwork was like more polished. He spent more time in college than Keaton, obviously, but he found ways to win before he entered the NBA to where like he knew what his bag was.
that's
Keaton
good. I see it. Yeah.
Keaton may not know necessarily what his ultimate NBA bag is going to be, but if he can vary his last step to where he's not just trying to make a layup with a defender draped on him, but he starts to euro, he starts to stop and reverse pivot. He's already good at faking guys out to get to the line because he has no problem drawing free throws. Then that's where I think you could see the development of like a 1A operator of offense. Okay. And Bennett, unfortunately, I blustered long enough for Bennett's laptop to die, so you get to hear the last word from me, which is always my design. I hate my guests. But thank you very much to Bennett for joining. We could have talked much, much longer about this draft and these picks. I intend to do so over the next several months. Thank you all for listening. If someone wants to, he's at BenDog28 on Twitter, by the way. But if someone wants to know, I mean, I don't have like an ironclad board per se. I don't really release them during the year, but I would probably go right now today. Let's get weird and say I'd go Peterson, Wilson, Boozer, Wagler, Dybantsa, Flemings, and that would be my top six. If anyone wants to hold me to it and rake me over the coals, but thank you all very much for listening. This was a fun episode. I'm glad we got to record it. This has been Chucking Darts. Thank you to Bennett Herbert. Uh, this has been Chucking Darts. It's okay to be wrong about sports. Find your dartboard and start chucking. Thank you.